The First Minister unveils her programme for government focused on the economy and education. But opposition parties say Nicola Sturgeon's plans fall short of Scotland's needs. A man goes on trial charged with the murder of Surjit Singh Chokar in Wishaw 18 years ago. 1 year down the track, the Borders Railway celebrates its first birthday.
When the trains are on time, it's good.
It's had some problems recently over the last few weeks, but hopefully they're getting those sorted out.
Great, It's great. It's gotten better, to be honest with you, over time.
Also on the programme, it's 11 years since 5 members of a family were swept into the sea in the Western Isles. Their relatives say they're still looking for answers. And blink and you'll miss it. Andy Murray hits his fastest ever serve as he powers into the quarter-finals at the US Open. Good evening. The First Minister has set out a new plan to boost Scotland's economy through help for companies looking to invest. It's part of the Scottish Government's programme for the new term at Holyrood. There's also a big emphasis on education and support for struggling families. But opposition critics said the package fell short of Scotland's needs. More details from our political editor, Brian Taylor.
This is brilliant. I can't believe it's going to be a football pitch.
New times, new ideas. Touring the new Boroughmuir High School in Edinburgh, Nicola Sturgeon prioritises education and the economy. She intends to channel cash directly to schools, handing more power to head teachers and to parents. To boost jobs, a £500 million scheme to guarantee loans to companies seeking to grow. It's a new departure and would need Treasury sanction alongside Holyrood agreement.
In short, we are determined to build an economy where everyone has a fair chance to contribute to growth and where everyone can share in the benefits of that growth.
Already, capital investment on projects like the new Forth Crossing is protecting jobs. Ms Sturgeon promised more investment in hospitals and transport. And more on the economy. A bill allowing ministers to cut air passenger duty in Scotland. A national institute to foster manufacturing, and action to boost oil platform decommissioning in the North Sea.
I call him Ruth Davison.
The Scottish Government won't match a planned Treasury cut in higher rate income tax. The Tories said that could disadvantage Scotland.
But pushing income tax rates above levels in the rest of the UK isn't going to help Scottish growth. It will hinder it.
Presiding Officer.
Labour welcomed measures such as gender balance on public boards, but accused ministers of being too timid.
Over the past decade, this Parliament has become more and more powerful, but the Government's programme has become less and less ambitious.
You can't do anything, hopeless. It's disgusting.
There's a bill to tackle domestic abuse, including, specifically for the first time, psychological abuse. Victims of childhood abuse will be given longer to lodge complaints. Today's programme also includes plans for a new social security system in Scotland, scrapping the so-called bedroom tax. And there's more on the family. Extra help with childcare, an attainment fund to help disadvantaged pupils at school, and a child poverty bill with support for struggling families.
I call on Patrick Harvey.
A qualified welcome for those, but Patrick Harvey of the Greens hates the planned cut in air passenger duty.
The lion's share of that benefit will go to the wealthiest frequent flyers.
Presiding Officer, this programme for government...
Nicola Sturgeon insisted today's programme was about the nuts and bolts, the day job, not independence.
I call on Willie Rennie.
Willie Rennie of the Liberal Democrats wasn't convinced.
The First Minister should ditch the charade and ditch her new plans for independence. That would be the best thing for Scotland.
We are all agreed.
Still with the Constitution, MSPs endorsed the appointment of Mike Russell as the Minister to handle Brexit for Scotland.
And Brian joins me now from Holyrood. As you said, Brian, Nicola Sturgeon concentrating there on the nuts and bolts of government, but the possibility of a second independence referendum still on the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, it's Scotland, it's Holyrood. Welcome to Scottish politics is always there in the background, frequently in the foreground, as indeed, of course, nowadays is Brexit. Nicola Sturgeon saying today is very much about the day job. Perhaps a suggestion there, perhaps an acknowledgement that some of the opposition attacks over the issue of the day job allegedly being neglected are beginning to get through to voters, although Ms Sturgeon has been completely dismissing that throughout. There are 14 bills in the new programme for government announced in the Scottish Parliament behind me here today, but there's a 15th and it's in draft form, and that's the bill potentially for an independence referendum in the event that the Brexit talks do not go the way that Scotland wishes, at least as interpreted by Nicola Sturgeon. I stress it's still there, but for now on the back burner.
Brian, thank you very much indeed. Well, as we've been hearing, the government says education is at the core of what it's doing, but is on a collision course with councils. Our education correspondent Jamie McIver is with us now. So, Jamie, who's in charge, councils or the government?
Well, Sally, in a sense, schools are a national service which councils are entrusted to provide. Both the Scottish Government and councils are important stakeholders, but when it comes to raising attainment in schools, there's only so much the Scottish Government can actually do. It's councils and individual schools that put a lot into practice. The problem comes when councils and the Scottish Government don't see things quite the same way, or if councils feel that the role risks being undermined in any way. Now, the plan for £100 million to go straight to head teachers could cause a real row. The money's coming from an increase in the council tax next year for the people who live in the most expensive homes. We don't have details yet, but some councils are worried that this money may effectively go into a national pot, which is then given out to the schools, with some areas winning and some areas losing. We'll get more details soon, but if that's the way the scheme works, you can expect a real row between Holyrood and some councils.
And more details emerging about standardised assessments in schools. So where do things stand now on that?
Well, indeed, Sally, and it's a controversial plan still in some quarters. To remind you, children will go through these assessments 3 times in primary school and again in secondary school. They're being piloted this year and they'll be rolled out across the country next year. Now, today we learnt that the first school-by-school information on the number of children who are meeting the required level in Curriculum for Excellence will be published in December. The government says it'll give clearer information about the attainment gap between how well children from relatively rich and poor communities do, and it'll allow the government to set clearer targets for closing that gap, which of course is a top priority for them. But some teachers, especially in secondary schools, remain to be convinced about the wisdom of this particular scheme.
Thanks for that, Jamie. Well, there's more on Scotland 2016 tonight. Here's Gary Robertson.
So in unveiling the programme for government, Nicola Sturgeon again said that education is the defining issue for ministers. So after 9 years in power, how will the SNP close the attainment gap? I'll ask the Education Secretary John Swinney and speak to the Conservative leader Ruth Davidson on BBC Two at 10:30.
A man has gone on trial accused of murdering an Asian man in North Lanarkshire almost 18 years ago. Ronnie Coulter denies killing Surjit Singh Chokar in November 1998 in Wishaw and trying to conceal the alleged crime. Andrew Black reports from the High Court in Glasgow.
Arriving at the High Court in Glasgow, the sister and mother of Surjit Singh Chokar with the family's lawyer. It's almost 18 years since he was killed. Mr Chokar, who was 32 and worked as a waiter, was killed in November 1998. Donald Finlay QC is defending the man charged with his murder, 48-year-old Ronnie Coulter. Alex Prentice QC today opened the prosecution's case. It's alleged that on the 4th of November 1998 at Garrion Street in Overtown, Wishaw, Mr Coulter attacked and murdered Mr Chokar by repeatedly punching him, hitting him with a wooden baton and striking him with a knife. He's further accused of attempting to conceal the alleged crime. Today's only witness was retired policeman Ian Davidson, who in 1998 was a detective sergeant who was part of the team investigating the killing. He set the scene for members of the jury by going through pictures and videos of the scene of the killing in Garrion Street and also the Gauk Thrapple area of Wishaw where Mr Chokar had a house. Mr Coulter is also accused of breaking into Mr Chokar's house in November 1998 and stealing a cooker, as well as forging Mr Chokar's signature on a giro cheque for £100 and 70 pence. He denies all the charges against him The trial's expected to last around 5 weeks. Andrew Black, reporting Scotland at the High Court in Glasgow.
The new Borders Railway is 1 year old today. The route runs from Edinburgh Waverley to Tweedbank near Melrose, a line that had been shut for 46 years and cost more than £350 million to reopen. Our reporter Cameron Buttle joins us now from the end of the line at Tweedbank. So Cameron, how's the service been running today?
Well, it's a rather embarrassing first anniversary. There's been a signalling problem to the north of here, and that's cut the line, causing delays and disruption up and down the line all afternoon and into this evening. And reliability has been an issue throughout the first year of operation. But this line is proving incredibly popular. Up to the beginning of this summer, 700,000 passengers. That's 50,000 more than they were expecting for the entire year. And some believe we're already past the million mark. Perhaps it's no surprise that a route this stunning has surpassed expectations, but the scenery can't hide some teething problems.
Generally very good. It's had some problems recently over the last few weeks, but hopefully they're getting those sorted out.
I've used it a few times, it's been good.
Yeah, and how are you finding the service?
When the trains are on time, it's good.
Since it came, I've been using it instead of the bus, because it is much more comfortable. We have to pay for it, but I'd still prefer it, yes.
It's great, It's great. It's gotten better, to be honest with you, over time.
Campaigners who back the line have been monitoring its progress and say there is a clear need for improvement.
The downside is that the service has been quite unreliable, problems with cancellations and late running because of the inadequate infrastructure, too much single track like we see here, not enough double track, and that's been a worry. It doesn't affect visitors quite so much, but for regular commuters that is a concern, that if it's too unreliable they'll go back to using the car or the bus.
ScotRail, who operate the service, admit there have been problems, but have promised to sort them.
Railways such as the Borders is fantastic. It connects the communities, it does so much. We will continuously improve it to make sure that whatever the issues are that have come up are fixed.
One of the main reasons for reopening the Borders railway line was to bring a significant economic impact to the area. And in places like Melrose, businesses are reporting an increase in the number of visitors. But questions have been asked about how far that economic impact has spread beyond the central borders.
So in the years ahead, we're going to start to see the economic impact start to flourish throughout the whole of the Borders. But in the first year already, there are very significant signs that that economic benefit is coming to fruition.
1 year on, there is now an expectation that the service will improve and the benefits will spread. But as one passenger put it, at least we now have a railway to complain about. Tonight there are still calls to extend the line down through Hawick and onto Carlisle. But even the most optimistic of people think that's at least a decade away, if it happens at all.
Cameron, thank you very much indeed. You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's 19 minutes to 7. A reminder of today's top story. The First Minister unveils her programme for government focused on the economy and education. And still to come, Andy Murray, the speed merchant, as he blitzes his way into the quarter-finals of the US Open. It's more than 11 years since 5 members of one family from South Uist died in one of the worst storms to hit the Western Isles in living memory. Archie McPherson, his wife Merdina, and their children Andrew and Hannah, as well as Merdina's father Callum Campbell, died when their cars were swept into the sea. There's never been a fatal accident inquiry into what happened, but relatives say they believe the tragedy may have been caused by the construction of a nearby causeway. From South Uist, Ian Hamilton reports.
This has been a desperate search, a grieving community scrambling to find their lost children. Locals used anything they could to find the youngsters. Garden rakes, old walking sticks.
The bodies of grandfather Callum Campbell.
Father Michael MacDonald recalls a tragedy that hit his parish community in South Uist in 2005 that claimed 5 lives.
I believe round about 7 o'clock, which was high tide, the waves were crashing over the top of the McPherson's house, and that was what prompted the family to leave.
On that night, the family came along this road, which was flooded. Now, these rocks weren't here then. They were put here 2 years after the accident. This was just an open piece of road built along the sandbank. The cars were swept away here, but it's believed that the source of the problem was further up the road.
The causeway is 2 miles further down the road there. With the growing waves, sea levels, the wind was pushing against the tide. The causeway was acting as a dam. The water had to go somewhere, so it burst on overland.
Locals believe that the accident could have been avoided. A family member told us that the original plan for the causeway, linking Benbecula with the island, had 3 gaps, but the final construction only had 1.
We would like to see a fatal accident inquiry. We did a Freedom of Information request to the local authority for all documents relating to the construction of the causeway. We got a nice box of papers, but as soon as we started going through it, it was evident there was a lot of papers missing.
Is there a degree of suspicion?
Yeah, I can say that, yeah.
Yeah? Based on what?
Well, if you ask for something and they don't provide it, it's as if it gives the impression of trying to hide something.
Maybe they think they're liable, or somebody's liable for making that decision to cut from 3 to 1. We just don't know. We want to find out, but we're facing a brick wall.
We invited Western Isles Council to respond to the concerns and suspicions regarding the Freedom of Information request. A council spokesperson told us that all the information requested was disclosed. 11 years on, residents of Iocha still live in fear of storms. In July, £25,000 was made available for a feasibility study to improve the causeway, and the Crown Office told us that a fatal accident inquiry was still under consideration. Ian Hamilton, reporting Scotland, South Uist.
The Unite and RMT unions will ballot offshore workers next week on a fresh offer aimed at resolving a dispute which has seen strikes on North Sea oil platforms. The Aberdeen-based oil services firm Wood Group says a mutually agreeable proposal has been drawn up following talks. The unions took part in a number of stoppages on Shell-operated platforms over the summer in a row over proposed changes to pay and conditions. Police say more than 20 people have called them with information after the murder of Caroline Glachan was featured in last night's edition of Crime Watch. The 14-year-old was found murdered near the River Leven in Western Bartonshire in 1996. Some of the calls related to the identity of the hooded man in the artist's impression. Now, a look at other stories from around the country. The Coast Guard Agency has ruled out the possibility of a second emergency tug being reintroduced in the Western Isles following the grounding of an oil rig on Lewis last month. It comes as a 1,500 signature petition calling for its reinstatement was presented at number 10 Downing Street. The Maritime and Coast Guard Agency says an independent review has concluded that a single tug has been sufficient. A portrait of the late MSP Margot MacDonald has been gifted to the Scottish Parliament. Her husband, Jim Sillars, presented the painting as a tribute to her 40-year commitment to politics. He described her as an extraordinary person who held firmly to her principles and was a brilliant communicator.
Margot had a wonderful mind that encompassed an incredible intellect, and from that intellect flowed ideas that have inspired more than a generation. And I still get people coming up to me telling me that they remember a speech or a statement she made that made the light bulb come on in their heads.
A stretch of tarmac laid over an historic cobbled street in the medieval heart of Aberdeen is to be removed. Aberdeen City Council said the resurfacing on Windmill Brae was necessary because some of the stones had come loose. Concerns had been raised on safety grounds by local businesses. One of the best-known archaeological sites in Orkney is set to close indefinitely. Maeshowe, part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site, will shut from the end of this month because of health and safety concerns. The Neolithic burial cairn sits across a busy main road from the visitor centre. Historic Environment Scotland says the site will not reopen until a solution is found to address the road safety problems. One of the earliest coins ever minted in Scotland is to be auctioned. The penny bears the head of King David I. It's thought to have been struck sometime after the Scots invaded England in 1136 to intervene in a civil war over the English throne. Experts think it could fetch up to £12,000 when it goes up for auction later this month. He's in the running for the American presidency, but closer to home, he's the man who changed a community forever by building a controversial golf course. Now, the story of Donald Trump and many is being brought to life in a photography exhibition in Fife. Graham Fraser has this report.
Before Donald Trump had his eye on the US presidency, he had his eye on the Many estate in Aberdeenshire. But locals did not want their precious sand dunes turned into a golf course. After years of disputes, the first ball was struck on the new course. Now, the story of the Many estate is being brought to life in an unlikely place. In St Andrews, the home of golf, Alicia Bruce's work is on display as part of a photography festival. She was first attracted to the story of Many as she felt the views of local people were not being heard.
I started off by going to visit Michael Forbes, who's behind me here, and instead of finding the angry peasant, pig, village idiot that Donald Trump called him, I found this really hospitable, lovely guy surrounded by friends and family.
Her work on the Many estate, though, attracted some unwanted attention.
I was threatened by Donald Trump's security, which is quite frightening. I was there to visit Susan Munro as a friend that day, and I had my camera with me, and I just wanted to take a picture of where the clubhouse was going to be. I was on her land, and out of nowhere this security guard comes along and starts threatening me, and he said that he was going to smash my camera. I was really angry.
A spokeswoman from the Trump International Course said allegations of bullying at Many are categorically untrue. She added the golf course has attracted tens of thousands of visitors and boosted tourism and employment in the area. Alicia is now preparing for a talk she will give at the festival about her experiences at the Many estate. One topic likely to come up is the American election race. Donald Trump now wants to become the president. What do you think about that?
I think it's terrifying.
The story of Donald Trump and the Many estate is far from over. Trump International wants to develop the golf course there, but is bitterly opposed to a planned wind farm nearby. At the moment, though, the only battle Donald Trump is thinking about is that to control the White House. Graham Fraser, reporting Scotland, St Andrews.
Andy Murray has delivered the fastest serve of his playing career at 141 miles per hour. It's twice as fast as a cheetah. He dominated the Bulgarian Grigor Dimitrov in New York, beating him 6-1, 6-2, 6-2 to reach a sixth US Open quarter-final. Rona McLeod can tell us more.
It was a near-flawless performance from the world number 2 in the Arthur Ashe Stadium. At times, Dimitrov was simply unable to cope as the Scot strolled to his straight sets victory. Taking 9 of 10 games at the outset, Murray overwhelmed. And then the 141 miles per hour serve to win the first set, so fast even the broadcasters missed it. So if you missed it too, just what does 141 miles per hour look like? Well, it's 5 times faster than the top speed of Usain Bolt. It's almost double the speed of the cheetah, the world's fastest animal. And in F1, where horsepower is all important, Murray power doesn't compare too badly, at almost 60% of the speed of a Formula One car. So back to the match. The second set continued with Murray delivering a resounding message that he's looking for his second US Open title.
Oh my word!
The Scot has now reached the quarter-finals in 22 of 23 Grand Slams.
Good reaction.
Murray said he wanted to keep his foot on the gas throughout, and in the third set he maintained concentration.
You know, I stayed on top of him. I didn't have any dip on my level, and I stuck to my tactics that were working well, and that was it. I mean, I just know from my side I didn't give him an opportunity once I was ahead to let him back in the match.
6-2 for the win and a place in the final 8. His next opponent will be Kei Nishikori of Japan. Andy Murray serving at twice the speed of a cheetah for a place in the semi-finals. Rona McLeod, reporting Scotland.
Now, after a very muggy, warm day, let's get the latest on the forecast for tonight and tomorrow. Judith's here. How's it looking then?
It's going to stay warm, actually. Thank you very much, Sally. Yes, indeed, Sally is absolutely right. Here are the top temperatures we saw today. We saw 26 degrees in Aberdeen. You can see the contrast over Scotland with the earlier satellite picture. Lovely sunshine here, but even in the south where we saw more cloud, 23 or 24 Celsius. Now, cloud generally increasing as we head through the course of the evening. Patchy rain or drizzle becoming confined to western areas, misty and murky towards western coastal parts. And once again, an incredibly mild or muggy night with overnight lows generally of around 14 to 16 Celsius. And we lose the strong winds from the northern Isles. So tomorrow will start off cloudy with misty, murky conditions along the west coast. It's a bit of a slow burner, but trust me, it will brighten up. So we are looking at really a lovely day. For southwest Scotland, it might be slower to brighten up, but it will see some sunshine. And for the Inner Hebrides, temperatures on the warm side, widely 20, 21 Celsius. Up towards the west coast, we will see a bit more in the way of cloud, particularly across the Western Isles. Some patchy rain spreading in here later. Some of that rain may clip into Orkney later on as well, but it does start dry with some brightness for the Northern Isles with lighter winds tomorrow. Caithness too, something brighter. Lovely sunshine once again for the northeast, 23, 24 Celsius. Edinburgh area, much brighter day too for the borders as well. So all in all, actually a lovely summer's day. Mother Nature has been very kind to us. So lovely evening to come as well. Then we'll start to see a bit of a change. Cloud thickening up in the west with outbreaks of patchy rain feeding in here as we head through tomorrow night. Now here's the pressure chart. Here's what's happening. We do have quite a deep area of low pressure to the west of us. Now it sails up to the west, but it throws out a weather front, introducing rain on Thursday and more rain to come on Friday from another low, but it does turn rather windy. So Thursday starts off with a band of rain crossing the country. It does lose its oomph as it moves eastwards, but it will be windy, a fresh to strong southwesterly wind, strong, reaching gale force potentially up towards the northwest. Those temperatures fresher than we've seen of late, but still respectable. Then more rain crossing the country on Friday. And that's your weather forecast.
Thank you very much, Judith. Now, before we go, a reminder of today's top stories. The First Minister has set out a new plan to boost Scotland's economy through help for companies looking to invest. It's part of the Scottish Government's programme for the new term at Holyrood. But opposition critics said the package fell short of Scotland's needs. And the Labour MP Keith Vaz has resigned as head of the influential Home Affairs Select Committee. It follows newspaper allegations that he paid for the services of 2 male prostitutes. Mr Vaz is a prominent member of the House of Commons and also Britain's longest-serving British Asian MP. And that's all from Reporting Scotland for now. I'll be back with the headlines at 8. Judith will join me for the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, though, from everyone on the team around the country, do have a very good evening. Bye-bye.